Well, it's good to be back, I guess. I definitely miss being away, definitely miss back in action again, which means back hosting here, mic'd up on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. It starts another week. And while I was gone, a lot happened in the Pittsburgh sports world. Kind of crossed my fingers. We'd have a bit of a calm before the storm, but not the case. Drama around the Pittsburgh Steelers, drama around a player that needed to not have drama. Dwayne Haskins, of course, trying to revive his career and potentially become the future of the Steelers quarterback position. But that may or may not have been derailed. Pirates have had an exciting weekend, to say the least. They played some exciting games, played evenly matched series kind of with the New York Mets there, including a walk-off grand slam from Jacob Stallings. But are the fans being unreasonable? What's the fan perception around the Pittsburgh? Been a conversation. Are there just fans that no matter what they do are just going to be negative? And then also the Pittsburgh Penguins finally releasing their protected list, as NHL teams had to do with the expansion draft coming up for the Seattle Kraken. And some notable players left the list. One, Zucker, another left off that list. Some thought maybe others would have been left off and not protected. Mike, this is, of course, presented by Martin Lawn Services at 412-849-5894. And Mike, first off, how you been? Glad to talk with you again.
Yeah, good to see you again. So I was following your trip to through Facebook. Good to see you had a good time and weather good, everything good.
Everything was great. You always get a breeze there. It was never too hot. We had rain for 5 minutes, got to do some off-roading and a UTV tour around the island, got to do some snorkeling, catamaran, relaxed. It was fantastic. But I'm back here.
Back to reality.
Yeah, back to reality, I guess. Finally, traveling. That's the only rough part. But Dwayne Haskins was busy while I was gone. He wasn't having the best of weeks. He certainly was not relaxed. As original reports are, he was the victim of domestic violence. And that's a whole different story based on the perception there, because some were acting like he committed the crime. His wife slapping him or whatever happened there, broke some of his teeth apparently, but being the victim of domestic violence. And then we do also get the reports that maybe would have led to what triggered that, since it's kind of seemingly came out of nowhere. They actually just got engaged, I believe, a week earlier or a month earlier or something like that. But reports are that he was then asking an Instagram model for money and gifts back, and to that actual evidence, but potentially had an affair with her. She's not going to give the money and gifts back, of course. I guess if you don't shoot your shot, you're not going to get a chance at the money and gifts back. But that, of course, didn't go well. Just what are your thoughts now on Haskins? Have they changed at all? Because we discussed it ad nauseum, and this kind of has been factual. He has the talent. Everyone has been wowed about his arm strength, but it always was about off the field. It really was. I mean, he has a talent edge over Rudolph, even though Rudolph's been there. But the Steelers at least are confident Rudolph's not going to go off the rails, can at least win them 8 games maybe on the field. There is a ceiling for him, but I think they're okay with him as at least the backup this year and maybe trying him for the future. Haskins needed to prove to them he could stay out of drama, could be on the up and up, and could also play well. Even if he's the victim, because even if he had an affair, you can't excuse domestic violence. He's the victim. It shouldn't have happened. But does this change anything for him? And is he now on a really thin thread that this potentially could have ruined his chance with the Steelers?
Well, I will say this: Dwayne Haskins fits in perfectly with the cast of characters that the Steelers have
right
have assembled over the years, so that there should be no problem there. This is a hard one to comment on because I don't know the.
Sure.
I'll just say this from everything that I'm gathering, and I don't want to be too hard, but I just think, despite his talent, it's just a matter of time before stuff like this happens. I don't think anyone that thinks that this guy, talent aside,
I'm sure nobody in Washington's surprised.
No, that's what I mean. Talent aside, when you have baggage like this and it's been with you and it's not a first time thing, it's not going away when you're an adult. It doesn't. There will be another incident with Antonio Brown where there's going to be more drama with Juju Schuster. it's just the way it goes. So anyone that thinks that this is going to go away because all of a sudden he came to the, 6-time Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers, that isn't going to happen. The only hope for the Steelers is that they can minimize it and that they see enough talent in this guy that they can move forward in. He needs to have a hell of a training camp for them to want to put up with any shenanigans that's going to go on with him, because there's going to be more. It's just a matter of when and what. So between now and then, starting in a few weeks, I guess the first preseason games in 18 days, he better be on his P's and Q's. He better impress the heck out of Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin for them to justify and to have enough faith to keep him around. Because I think if they keep him around, he could be an answer. He could be a future
first round pick, 15th overall.
Yeah, he could be a possibility. He's young enough. He's not 29 years old.
That's why they brought him in.
Guy who was just drafted a couple of years ago. So I think it's there, but I don't know that anyone knows. You just don't know what's in this guy's past. You don't know what's going to happen with his fiance. You don't know what's going to happen with his Instagram. There's probably more there, or as far as there's more out there in the closet that hasn't come out yet. So it's just a matter of, what and how all this stuff's handled.
I'm sure. And it also, look, again, the reason why it's hard to comment on this and why there's some bit mutters. The weird positive here is, based on how other NFL players maybe in this situation with this kind of personality would have handled things, I guess there's a glass half full take that he didn't, if he had an affair, that's horrible, but he didn't really, like, say Antonio Brown would have. He didn't hit anyone. He just was, this happened, and then maybe they were arguing, and he took the hit, and then he didn't react. So that's the slightest bit maturity that's there.
Yeah.
So that is the slightest bit. There's no reports. That's another thing that normally in these you might get an accusation. He's not being accused of any assault, whether it be sexual, physical, verbal. He's not being accused of anything outside of potentially being with an Instagram model. So it could be worse. As crazy as that sounds, obviously it's not good where it is. I also think that at the very minimum, there's some stupidity there, honestly, because we didn't hear Instagram model until he made the dumb decision to try to ask for. I mean, he's not a millionaire yet, but he did get draft pick money. He's getting paid now. His more than most people in the world, even if they're not in the NFL. It's low risk, but he's not broke. He shouldn't be. So she wasn't going to give the money back. You can't be asking her, and that's why we know all of that. So if he just would have shut up and let it go, maybe she would have let it go. So where this is going to go, I do think there's a positive there, and it is interesting. I mean, obviously, initially people wanted to ship him out for just being the only thing that happened that I could see there. You're giving him some rope, but it sucks to hear this about him, because this is, as you said, this is the only thing you wanted him to be on his best behavior, try to impress the team, and he's not able to do that with all this baggage on there. And it is a low risk, high reward situation. They brought him in because of the talent, first round draft pick, only gone a couple years, very young. They're not fully sold on Mason. Ben is old. Why not? But it makes it easy to cut bait too. This isn't like James Harrison, who had a contract, who's a borderline Hall of Famer. This isn't like Ben when he had his issues and was the face of the franchise and a quarterback. This is low risk, high reward. They could cut bait real easy.
Yeah, it's just annoying that
it's annoying. Yes,
it's annoying the fact that it's going to happen. It's everyone. If you had to place a bet when this guy got signed by the Steelers, that there would be some incident or some reason of him being in the news aside from football, everyone would have taken the bet. And if you, in the other hand, if you had to make a bet like that somebody like Cam Hayward or TJ Watt wouldn't be involved in something like this, you would take the bet that you would never hear Cam Hayward involved in some sort of off the field incident. That's just the type of person he is. And unfortunately, Dwayne Haskins hasn't developed enough of a reputation or person in his young career that people would have enough faith in him that he wouldn't be involved. And I honestly, I believe And I hate to say this, and I don't want to, but there'll be something else. It's just a matter of what and how big.
Yeah, and also, even if we didn't have the Instagram modeling, he did nothing wrong here. Again, then he's the victim, and it sucks. But it's his fault that the perception's out there, and he has the short leash because everything that happened in Washington, by all accounts, is all his fault. So you are responsible for your reputation in a way, even if you're not at fault for everything, and that's plenty of us. So it sucks. It's not looking good. We'll see how this can go. There's still some time before camp in that preseason game, and he certainly needs to be out of the news prior to that, even if he needs to stay home and lock the door and quarantine himself all over again.
There's only one good thing about this, Mike.
Yeah.
Been hell of a traffic for Steelers now.
It has been, yes, and all of us covering the Steelers, it has been hell of a traffic. Yeah, it's out of control with the hits for those Haskins articles, and it makes it conversation here on shows like this. It's great for talk radio. It's great for people covering the Steelers in a way because this is the period that's kind of boring. But thanks to Haskins, we're back in action again while we're getting through that calm. Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti here, mic'd up here on PSL, PSN, and all throughout the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks here as I still try to wake up and get back into my Monday swing of things post-honeymoon. Moving on from that, though, we're going to touch quickly here on the Penguins announced their protected players list. Obviously, Crosby, Malkin, etc. on that list. Tanev not on the list. Zucker not on the list. They are protecting Jeff Carter despite his age. He played really well in the playoffs last year, brought in for that. They didn't go as far as that trade would have made it positive. It ended up really being meaningless, losing right away. But a great player who has the experience, and it clearly tells me they're still trying to kind of win now mode, even though he is an older player. Any thoughts on this list? I mean, these are some young players that they're kind of letting dangle out there in the wind. But it does scream to me they're kind of giving up on Tanev, or at least okay if that would be the case, based on the contract situation. Some of this might be contractual. But there's been some debate just because of the Carter situation and his age, everyone thinking they would just let him go.
I think it's all contractual. I think Ron Hextall is trying to rewrite some of the wrongs of Jim Rutherford.
Especially at the end.
He went and we praise him, and rightly so sometimes, for going for it. And
which is what he was paid to do, and they did win. Right.
But when you don't win, there's another side of that as far as lost draft picks, lost prospects, signing guys like Tanev to a ridiculous contract that they need to get the cap situation in order. They have no money right now to do anything, and part of it is some of their contracts that Jim Rutherford signed. So for people that'd be surprised that Tanev was left off, that they're praying that Seattle takes him and gets that off the books. So it makes no sense. It would make sense for them to take a player like Jeff Carter, who's in his last year. You could possibly, he could bring some leadership to a team, and you could ship him off in mid-season for the trade deadline or something and bring something back. He has one more year left on a contract. So that never made it, why people didn't figure that out. But I don't think any of these are, whoever they lose, I don't think it's going to be a blip on the Penguins' radar.
I mean, losing Tanev isn't going to be the end of the world. No,
none of that is. It's all about their goaltending and finding complementary players. And none of these guys that are on this list, I kind of like keeping Jeff Carter around. I like what he saw. I think he's a good type of player that they need in the playoffs, so they can keep him healthy throughout the season and ready for the playoffs. But none of what happened yesterday or what was revealed yesterday is surprising to me.
Yeah, it shouldn't really be how surprising it was to some Penguin fans out there. And I think the only conversation of Carter letting him maybe go is the fact that he was great in the postseason. Yeah, he's great in postseason. He's won cups. You love having that guy around. A team leader certainly can provide you compliment. Did in the postseason that they need beyond their top lines. And Zucker a little bit was doing so. Tanev wasn't doing that. The contract sucked to do that. But maybe there's a thought for some they wanted to basically leave Carter out there is just because with his age and the fact that he was not playing well prior to coming to the Penguins for about a year and a half. Maybe you're figuring that's not going to happen again. Almost you sell high, even though they're not really trading. But like it may occur again. Maybe you're figuring that while he'd be a great guy in the locker room, he's not going to do what he did at the end of the season in the playoffs again, just because his age eventually will dictate that he has to fall off the cliff at some point. But that, who knows if it's not a big deal contractually if that would occur. And also there's certainly a thought process that maybe he was sucking prior to the Penguins because he wasn't in a situation that he had a chance to win for a couple of years. He did with the Penguins and then obviously turned back on. So you don't know how long he's going to be that impactful of a player. I think most people were surprised on how good he was, even though they thought he'd be good. But contractually, it made sense to count. And Tanev, it's a contractual move, 100%.
100%. Yeah, they need to find ways. The hard, almost impossible thing is to try to find ways to improve this team with such little cap room.
Yeah,
they have, and
it's about goaltending. It really is. Right. They would have won the series if they had better goaltending, no matter what else happened. That's just a fact.
Yeah, and they have no room to move anybody or to pick anybody up until you get rid of somebody. And to pay Tanev $3.5 million for a bottom six player, he's probably I don't know. Right. He's a fourth line player, and I don't care what he brings to the locker room or
the heart and soul of the team.
The heart and soul and all that stuff. You can't pay guys on the fourth line that type of money. That's not when you have guys like Crosby, Malkin who are making that type of money. You just can't pay that type of money, and they're figuring that out now once Rutherford's gone.
Yeah, and also even some defensemen like Dumoulin, like any of those players, obviously a good player, but if anyone, there was conversation about trading him and moving on from him the past year or so. He's one of those few players that can bring you value in a trade. So if you do have to move on from him for whatever reason, you want to get something back. Whereas Tanev's not going to bring you anything back because of the contract, because heart and soul is not going to bring you value back either. Those players are great on teams that win cups. That'll be remembered forever. Maxime Talbot was kind of that guy, but Talbot also produced more. And those heart and soul players, you can't covet them too much if you're losing in the first round. They're heart and soul, and you're not beaten too far. If you beat to the cup final, then we're going to appreciate the heart and soul. But at that point, maybe you need a new heart and soul. Mike Vukovcan mic'd up here, Martin Lawn Services. Thanks to them, obviously, for presenting the show. To wrap things up, the Pirates go through, and I did watch it there on MLB Network while I was in Aruba. The Pirates go through their draft. Mostly seemed like everyone was okay with that draft pick with Davis coming on to Pittsburgh. So mostly that wasn't as polarizing as I thought it would be, even though there were some that were naysayers. But then you pivot from the draft into the weekend where you get the walk-off grand slam. They play really well with a Mets team that I don't think prior to the season anybody thought they would ever be evenly matched with. This team is still playing together. They have all-stars there. We got through the all-star game of the two all-stars. They have individual players that are playing well. They're missing some pieces, obviously. This is not a good team. But for being such a bad team, there's all-stars there. There's excitement there. And the draft is positive. But despite those few positives on a season that everybody knew was not going to be a winning season, Ben Cherington, now a new regime there, you can't hold the past against this crew. However, there are people that no matter what are going to hold the past against this crew. You see the draft, you see Henry Davis, and they're still saying it doesn't matter because of the ownership. I can't say the owner is going to try his damnedest, and at some point maybe it will get broken up a little too early. The ceiling won't be as long as some other clubs. But what are your thoughts on the past week for the Pirates from the draft to the weekend, and then the fan perception that some people, despite all these positives, that nationally they think the Pirates are doing everything they can, even though it wasn't going to be a season that would be winning now and it would be a few years, that are still saying, doesn't matter. Just literally pointless moves, pointless baseball, almost might as well just end the franchise if you can't move on ownership-wise.
Well, I think it was a heck of a week for the Pirates. And the draft, they brought in Ben Cherington because Neil Huntington and his regime just didn't get it. These guys do. You just look at his track record of drafting. A lot of the great players on the Boston Red Sox were a result of Ben Cherington. A lot of the guys he drafted since he's been here. entering next season, the Pirates are going to have the top-rated farm system in baseball. And here's the problem.
That's crazy too. Yeah, it was real bad.
Here's what causes the uproar of fans, but I say mostly media, and I'm not going to name anybody. You know who they are.
Yeah.
People, for some reason, media, for some reason in this town, and I've pointed this out for two to 3 years on Twitter. There is such a divide in this town of beat writers and just general people. They're so protective of the teams they cover. Anytime anybody shows any optimism toward another team, it's as though you're taking a shot at the Penguins or the Steelers. You're allowed to say that the only way the Pirates are ever going to be good again is to build a system up. Right. So if that's happening, why can't you point that out and say it's always about the system? It's negative. The one thing that I will say is that, and you made the point, until Bob Nutting shows that he's willing to buy into the plan of his Sherrington and Travis Williams and those guys,
right.
Some people have the right to question the Pirates. But as far as what is happening, this plan, I know this is probably plan 10,000 of the Pirate rebuild.
For the fans and media, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for what's going on right now, there's not a person that can't say it's positive of what's going on. And it's annoying that, we had a media while you were out of town. I'm not sure if you followed it or not.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, the media spat of, let me say this, Dejan Kovacevic, I'll point his name out because he's a guy that I've had a relationship with for years, on and off. Sometimes we battle, sometimes we don't. Dejan covers the Pirates in his website fairly. Just because he points out positive stuff, to call him a fanboy is just idiotic, to be honest. He's covering the team the way there's no difference between how people cover the Penguins, and it's just annoying.
Yeah, there's some fanboys that cover the Penguins, the Steelers, and you're always going to have that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just stupid, and this hatred for the Pirates in this town because they've been bad because of ownership and stuff is just to me it's just annoying.
Yeah, and I followed it a little, even though I was rolling my eyes there. But I think the issue with Pirate fans and media, and you touched on this, even though this is only a couple years in for this regime, even though Ben Cherington's proven it before and proved it with the Red Sox, and I get it's totally different because we've said that before. Because you can win with the doesn't mean you can win with the Pirates, because yes, he built his, but he also Sox, which is concern for Pirate fans and media, which is why there are people that are just going to say, oh, it doesn't matter, is because after Formson built Red Sox, absolutely, he'll admit, had to buy some players to win now and speed up the process. He had to spend money. So there are people going to say, well, yeah, he built up the farm system. The Pirates are building this up, but they broke up 2015 too early because they spent a year and a half early. Same ownership still there despite etc. And they're going to still bounce out friends. Reynolds and Hayes are there for 3 years to get to 31 years old. If they're not yet winners, they're going to move them. Or they're not going to want to pay them, etc., so on and so forth. And all of that may occur. So I think there is some validity to, I understand Pirate fans and media or whoever, even nationally from an outside perspective, saying, well, we're only going to go so far. Because it is factual in the last 30 years, pretty much at least in LCS, a lot have won a pennant at least once. There have been small markets, Tampa, the Royals went to back-to-back World Series and won one, that have been able to build up the farm, do it without spending tons of money, and eventually you got to overpay a little bit. You cash in for a few years, you have a window, you really got to win then. The Pirates had a window, they didn't seize it and win a series in that window, and people are just going to be always annoyed by it. But as far as what Cherington can control, what Williams can control, even what Derek Shelton can control from a perspective of a manager, even though he probably won't be there whenever this team wins eventually, and there's some reason to criticize him on some moves, that this past year of the trades in the offseason, the draft pick, to these moves, to what's been going on, that they have had multiple all-stars and some players actually play above what many would have expected in a bad season. That's all been good. If you take all of this and you take the name Pirates off and put Rays on it, even another small market, people would love it and nationally it would get praised. But because it's Pirates, people are always going to say, well, again, yeah, great, but 3-4 years from now, they're going to break it up. They're only going to let them have 1 or 2 postseason runs. They're not going to let it go on forever. 30 years of no LCS, everything Mike's saying. So that's all factual. They can't get away from it. And unfortunately, the only way to get away from it is to actually win a playoff series, not just get in and have a couple-year window, but that's the only way to get away from it. But I get it all.
Here's the difference, though.
But
here's the difference of what you said, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is in 2015, that team was built on veterans that were playing well, and they had no base as far as young players that would be able to replace those guys.
Well, they were built up from being in the farm. They finally got to that level. Yeah.
But they had nothing below that.
Right.
Once those guys were gone, Martins, McCutcheons, Walkers, those type of guys, there were none.
Yeah.
What's going on right now with Tampa, they've been in the headlines the last few years, and they've gotten rid of players, is because
they can recycle back.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what you need to build up first. And that's what Sherrington, he's smart. He realizes that. It's not just
the Rays get rid of players even after winning a pennant. They got rid of players, but they recycled back in.
Yeah, and they've recycled good players, not just recycled players.
Right.
They had high and they continue. They have guys this year, Wander Franco. Their system is loaded.
They also develop when they're there, because that's Glasnow, etc. There are players, Meadows. They do get better when they're there. So that the two things the Pirates need to do is have the farm built up, and then make sure players, when they're in Pittsburgh, can be developed into being good as they are in Pittsburgh. And those things look like they're improving from what they were. But you can't blame Sherrington for what happened 7 years ago.
Exactly, and that's why I give these. We've said this a million times since we've been doing this show. I'm not going to be judging the Pirates on the stupid things that Neil Huntington did.
Yeah, okay? It can't. It's totally unfair.
I'm judging it. Ben Sherrington, trades he makes, signings he makes, draft picks he makes, players that develop here. That's the only fair way to do it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not talking about and when it comes time to sign a player or to re-up a player or whatever, then I'll judge Bob Nutting again. His track record is awful. There's no one in.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if it gets to the point where they're a 90-win team, and then they go ahead and lose one first-round series, a division series, and then you're saying, okay, one more year, maybe they'll have a chance. And then prior to getting that second year, or after 2 years, and then all of a sudden they have 2-3 years left on the contract of Hayes, and they're going to talk about trading them because they already know they don't want to pay the future, or even less. Reynolds or JT or something like that, then you can say, okay, well, this is maybe pointless because no matter what you do, they're going to only give you a 1-year window, which no one can operate in. Okay, maybe that's valid, but in terms of cover, nobody can cover a team on a beat and say, well, doesn't matter. I mean, you can do that on radio, you can do that on these shows, you can do that as an Twitter. It can occur. It certainly is a valid opinion. I get it. See what happens this next regime and how it ends whenever they actually are winners again. And that still likely is 2-3 years down the road if positive. Next year's probably not a winning season again to get ready for that. But there's no way to cover a team, no matter how good or bad they are, saying that was a good move, but it's literally pointless because of what happened 6 years ago and because of what I know about the ownership. Everyone knows the same things. You just physically cannot cover the team that way. It's just impossible. But we'll see.
I'll say this to the people covering the Penguins. They've been very in the quote fanboys of the Penguins that we will see how this franchise does without. They've been very blessed to have 66, 87, and 71 on their roster. So
68. I mean, it's been galore.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how this team does. Crosby isn't going to live forever here. Malkin isn't going to be where I think we're already starting to see the signs of him heading down to the average road. He's not there yet. He's still a really good player, but we'll see how their reaction is when the Penguins aren't loaded with superstars and what their reaction is to how they perceive the team then.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about fans with the Penguins too, great family in there now, but they've also been very blessed and very spoiled in a way. You go back to the early 2000s, Rico Fata, if that's a name for some Penguin fans out at that time, nobody would go into the arena. So when you had a 2-year, 3-year blip where it was just atrocious hockey, the money was to Kansas City, etc., we're not going to relitigate. Nobody was going. So they've been very, very blessed. But if that team sucks, you can certainly make an argument the attendance would be the exact same that it is for the Pirates. That'll do it for this show. Stick with us the week. Subscribe. Hit up all these sites, action, and let's go, because a lot of is still out there. Mike Vukovcan and Mike Asti, thanks to services there. Contact Doug Martin at 412